Hey guys, and welcome to my channel, Time is But a Window. Now in today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be telling you a story. The story of how I first met Fawn and we won every single league that year. Now this was a long time ago, and because of that it wasn't in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Hey, it wasn't even in Counter-Strike Source. It was all the way back in Counter-Strike 1.5. Not 1.6. Now, for those of you a little bit confused by this statement, let me explain something. Before Counter-Strike moved over to Steam, 1.5 was the last update of the original game that was the mod for Half-Life. Now, at this point, leagues had already been around for quite some time. We started off with the main of games, and then we eventually had OGL and Cal. Now, Cal was the most prestigious of the leagues at the time, and this was mainly because Cal culminated at the end of every 6 months in a big tournament known as CPL. Now, given its time period, this was basically Counter-Strike's major. Teams came from around the world trying to compete for a chance to win first prize. Now, I know what you're wondering, why is this relevant to my story? Well, in the first CPL where Counter-Strike was present, there was a team in America known as X3 that was #1 in America. Now, as luck would have it, when I first started playing Counter-Strike, one of my friends just so happened to be on the X3 red team. I guess you'd call this sort of a farm team or a practice team for the X3 blue team, which was the professional team. Now, while this was very exciting at the time, a few of us felt that we should move away from the pack and form our own team, so we created X4. You get it? Because it's the next step after X3. But we were young, and we were from the 90s, so we wanted to be edgy, so we decided to add an H and call it X4H, which is hacks backwards. In hindsight, it really wasn't the best name to have as a Counter-Strike team, because even back in those days, we had cheats like OGC that really were destroying the community. Meanwhile, we were a fully legitimate team that was pretty much telling everyone we cheated, which made it very hard for us to get scrimmages on MIRC. Now, for those of you who have no idea what MIRC is, it's basically Discord but without voice. We would use it to find scrims and play pugs. We didn't have anything like ESEA at the time or Faceit that would find it for you, or even any kind of competitive mode in Counter-Strike. It didn't help that our team was full of egos, and because of this, our strategies became very simplified because everyone thought we could just outshoot our opponents. And the truth is, we were actually sort of right, especially on maps that were more straight up, like Dust 2 or Cobblestone, going as far as taking down a team called DIEW, which ended up going pro only a couple seasons later. That is, until our first loss, where the team completely died. See, this is the issue with having too many egos and no willingness to compromise. Oh, and we were way too immature. Now, I salvaged as many players as I could from the original roster, but we still had 2 spots we needed to fill. And considering we were a relatively unknown team that people thought were cheating, very few people wanted to come play for us. Now, this threw our season into a downward spiral, and as the full-time leader of this team now, I was trying to pick up some people that would actually complement us. Basically, I was looking for what you call support player, because at the end of the day, I wanted to make a team that was a little bit more tactical than how we started off. That is, until I tried out this 11-year-old named Riceball. This kid had aim like I had never seen before, and I figured that I could train him to become a great Counter-Strike player. Now, I should mention that the events of everything that I have been describing up to this point was in Counter-Strike between 1.1 and 1.3. At this time, we did not have a first-person death camera. Because of this, you couldn't see your teammates' screens or crosshairs, so you really couldn't tell if they were cheating. In fact, all competitive servers had a fade to black upon death, so whenever you were dead, you would just stare at a black screen. That is until Counter-Strike 1.4 came out. At that point, whenever you would die, you would get to spectate your teammates in first person. Now, that wasn't the only difference from today's Counter-Strike. The game was also played in MR12, which means you had max rounds of 12 and the first to 13 would win. Now, while it seemed like smooth sailing from here on out, it really wasn't the case because college was coming up and we were at that age where we had to choose really between going to college and sitting around playing video games all day. So this, of course, threw the team into utter turmoil as 2 teammates left, leaving us with a 3-man roster. So, of course, I was headed right back into Feinringer to find 2 more players to fill those spots. Now, here's when things start to get really interesting. While trying out players, we got a scrim against Hat Clan. Now, for those of you guys that have no idea who Hat Clan is, basically they were a Cal main team that had Fawn on the team. Their team's tag consisted of a bunch of different randomized little hats in front of their names. Each one had their own personalized hat. How cute. Now this turned into one epic matchup on the map D Aztec. It was an epic game that lasted the full 24 rounds where they ended up winning 13-11. Now while I had about 28 kills at the end of this game, my teammates didn't do quite as well. And while there was a huge deviation between me and the rest of my team, the other team had kill counts that were all relatively equal. At this point, the team was already on the verge of dying, and I was just trying to pull it back together. That's when Fawn decided to message me and have us play a couple 2v2s. Now at this time, my best friend had convinced me to switch over from a cloth pad to a hard pad. And because of this, I played the 2v2s like total shit. Luckily, Fawn was able to carry us to victory. And while we won game after game after game, he started to talk to me about putting together a new team. A team with aspirations to go pro and win everything. Of course, I didn't just want to leave my best friend who was also on my team behind, so I talked to Fawn about bringing him along. Now, while he didn't play great in that Aztec game, overall he was actually a very good Counter-Strike player, a very good entry fragger. And because of this, it didn't take much convincing to get Fawn on board with the idea. But when I went over to my team and started to discuss it with my friend, Riceball came in. Riceball pleaded for us to not leave the team, and we decided to do another game. In this game, Riceball decided the best possibility was to full-on toggle cheats. Now, I don't know if he used any cheats up until this point, but he was blatantly cheating in this game, and as soon as me and my friend saw this, we immediately left the game and joined up with Fawn. Now, let me go into how serious this team was that Fawn was creating. Now, these contracts had some pretty interesting stipulations. For one, we had to practice every day except 2 days a week. We had to practice for 4 hours a day every day that we did practice, and we also had to do an hour to 2 hours of practice before practice every day. This hour to 2 hours of practice before practice was to make sure you had nade lineups down and were able to warm up. This meant we were required to play a minimum of 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now, our main goal was to go completely undefeated throughout the entire season and be moved up straight from Cal Open to Cal Invite. This had happened recently by a team called Pinnacle, so we knew it was possible. And just so you guys know, Invite was considered the pro league at the time. But Cal wasn't the only league that we could play, and we wanted to get as much practice as we could. A new league had recently opened up called UGS, and there was also OGL. Now, OGL was kind of a meme league, but there was 2 different ways you could play it. One of which had a set time limit for the entire match. It was whoever got the most rounds within that time limit. The other way you could play it was basic MR12 rules. So of course, not only did we sign up for Cal, we signed up for UGS and both OGL leagues. Now, all the practice that we were doing, plus all the leagues that we were doing, we're going to make this a full-time job for sure. Obviously, though, we made Cal our #1 priority because that was the most important league, the one that led to CPL. Now, at the time, most map callouts weren't completely standardized, so we went down and broke down every individual map into smaller sections and renamed them. This meant we had some really incredibly strange callouts such as Michael and Bolton, but it allowed us to be far more specific and accurate with our callouts. Now, one of the big stipulations Fawn put on the team is that he didn't want egos to get in the way. He wanted everyone to play selflessly, and he wanted to choose which 5 would be playing on which map. Basically, the idea behind this is that he always wanted to play the best players for that map. This was before best of 3s and best of 5s in league play. Before the season, we used to have what was called preseason matches. This is where leagues would test out new maps before implementing them into the regular season. Now, this was really before Fawn knew about my tendencies and how to really play me. And because of that, he was playing me as a rifler while he took the primary opping position. Now, the good news is we still managed to win the match, and because we won it without losing a single round, I said that we should try to win the entire season without losing a single round. Of course, today that just sounds utterly ridiculous, but somehow at the time, my teammates backed me up on this, and we were gonna all quit if we lost a single round during league play. Now let me explain how Cal Open worked at the time. Back in those days, you'd get 1 match a week. Now the good news was UGS was starting at the same time, and it mirrored the exact same maps that Cal had, with the exception of the ones that were owned by Cal. For example, CPL Mill, and of course, CPL Fire. This means with the exception of 2 weeks during the season, we'd be able to practice 1 map for an entire week. Personally, I miss this system and think this is how ESEA Open should be handled. I think a best of 3 system works better for once a team is established and already has their strategies down for every map. Anyways, the first week finally started, and the first map was Aztec. At this point, I had earned Fawn's respect to become the primary AWPer. And we were so hyped, not just for winning this game, but because we were going to win without losing a single round. And that is when it happened. We lost the pistol round. Now, we were all so devastated after losing the pistol round, and I was so pissed off and immature at the time, I was like, you know what, after this game, I quit, and I bought up a deagle in armor, and just rushed bridge room, killing 2 of them. We ended up ecoing them, and not only that, we ended up winning the game 13-1. Now, the good news is, after winning 13-1, I realized how irrational quitting the team would be, and we started to make history, winning match after match after match. We were going undefeated in both leagues in OGL, going undefeated in UGS, and going undefeated in Cal. Could anyone stop us? We were beating people so one-sidedly that an invite team decided to try to end our run by going back into open to play against us. Like, no joke, an invite team literally hijacked a roster just so they could play against us in open. Now, this was going to be our first real test to find out if we could actually be a pro team. Now, we knew the map coming up to play against them was going to be D Inferno, so we practiced and we grinded our asses off to get ready and in shape. Eventually, Fawn wrote down who we were going to have play the match. Now, I was one of the 5 that was set to play the match. The only problem was, the morning of, I wasn't feeling well and told Fawn I wouldn't be able to play the match. So they would end up having to go and play the match without me. Meanwhile, I sat there watching the Go TV, also known as HLTV back in the day. It was a close match with a lot of back and forth, but at the end of the match, the score was 13-11. And we had lost. We felt absolutely devastated after losing to that GSX Forsaken roster. But we didn't slow down for a moment. In fact, we decided to step things up. With our newfound notoriety, Fawn started pulling new players from invite teams and main teams, strengthening our core, inflating the roster to make it even more competitive. Partially, I blamed myself for not competing in that last match. If I had been there, maybe things would have gone differently. I made a vow to myself that I would not miss another match. And when I say I didn't miss another match, I mean I didn't miss another match. I played every single OGL match, UGS match, and Cal match. And these games weren't even relatively close. We just absolutely annihilated everyone. In every league except Cal, we went completely undefeated through the regular season, making it into playoffs. Meanwhile, in Cal, we made it into playoffs with a 7-1 record, completely shredding every team we played against, until finally we made it up to the number 3 seed, Wired. Now, this was going to be our next big challenge, comprised of a main team mixed with a couple invite players. This was set to be a difficult match. But like usual, we took our time and we practiced thoroughly with it. Eventually, Fawn released who he wanted to start in this match. The one person that we were surprised was missing from the rotation was Fawn himself. Now, this is a problem in multiple ways, one of which is that Fawn is not only the leader of the team, but he's also the strat caller. Now, the good news is Fawn had implemented a hierarchy order when it comes to calling strats. Now, I know what you're asking, why did Fawn decide to sit out for this match? Well, the truth is, he wanted to have his 2 strongest oppers on this map, which would be me and Theory. And since this was a newer map, he didn't feel super comfortable with it. Before we knew it, it was game time. Had Fawn made the right call? Well, by halftime, I already had 18 kills. And by the time the game was over, we had won 13-6. So I'm going to say that he probably made a good decision here. Meanwhile, we were cruising through OGL, which was set up more like a ladder, hitting the number 1 spot in both modes. In fact, it's hard to believe that we didn't even have one difficult game in all of OGL. Meanwhile, in UGS, we were cruising through playoffs, slowly making our way up to the finals. Honestly, we didn't even have one close game throughout all of playoffs here, just absolutely destroying it and easily winning the grand finals. Which brings us to our Cal Playoff Grand Finals. Honestly, this one was a little bit disappointing for a couple reasons. First of all, we didn't get to have a rematch against the invite team because they had all gone back to their invite team. And we had pretty much already knocked out the only real serious competition, which left us with a team called Shadow Dynasty. Now, back in those days, we didn't really have any kind of anti-cheat. If someone thought someone was cheating in the game, they would report them to the admins, and the admins would watch the demo and make a decision based on a judgment call. Which means there was a lot of people cheating in the old days and would get away with it. Because of that, a lot of players on Shadow Dynasty thought we cheated. More specifically, they thought I cheated, because out of all the players on my team, I was the only one that was yet to be LAN proven. So like a lot of other players who felt they were being treated unfairly in those days, they decided to use some extra external assistance. So they had one of their players blatantly cheat against us. Little did they know the map was DDoS 2. Well, I mean, they knew the map was D-Dust 2, but little did they know how good we were on D-Dust 2. First of all, crossing mid was a horrible idea as I consistently got mid picks there. But more importantly, we were just a much better team in general. At the half, I top fragged with 13 kills. Now that doesn't sound super impressive until you realize that all of my teammates had 12 kills and 11 kills underneath me. We ended up winning that game 13-1. 13-1 against someone who was admitting afterwards that he was blatantly cheating against us and still couldn't win. Someone who was so obsessed with this game that afterwards I went to a LAN tournament. He showed up at that LAN tournament just to see if I could pull off what I pulled off online on LAN. Of course, I got MVP that tournament by winning the tournament and dropping 24 kills a game in MR12. But that's a story for another time. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video when hearing about how Fawn and I met and how we ended up destroying every single league for one entire season. Please like this video if you enjoy this content and want to see more content like this in the future. And as always, have a great day.